back again and do more, so that we were very well rehearsed. And as he said, though, because once you'd got it down, that was it.
And of course, they were only 3-hour sessions at Abbey Road.
Yes, yeah.
You know when you're in the pub, Hugh?
Right.
That's when we replaced the drums.
I knew something about that.
Yeah, that's what it sounded. Well, speaking of floating in over the top, Colin, great to have you here today. What was it like for you hearing these tracks being created and thinking, well, I'm going to sing over these?
Well, it's very interesting. I thought that all the songs, I think they're classics. All, you know, Rod and Chris wrote all the songs. I didn't write any of them, and I just thought they were really beautiful songs. And it was a pleasure.
Yeah, they are.
Comparatively easy to put the vocals on. And as they mentioned earlier, we rehearsed extensively before we went into the studios. So for most of it, with one exception actually, I knew the songs really well, and so we recorded the vocals very quickly. It was great.
There's a great photo in the book, and I'm going to do the sales pitch for these guys, because this book really is incredible. You see pictures in there and go, wow, I've never seen any of these photos before, and I've kind of, makes me sound like a tart here. I do put myself about. I've never seen any of these pictures, so I'm going, I've never seen that. So, but there's a great photo, which I presume is in Abbey Road, where I think it says Paul sat down, and then the rest of you are all around, and you're sat or stood in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
Did you ever do anything live for the album?
Not vocals, no.
No. Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
He sang when we played it, but then sometimes we replaced the vocal.
Oh, so kind of like a guide vocal then. Okay, that makes sense. I don't want you guys to fall out over the 50th anniversary of the album. Please don't fall out.
It lasted 50 years.
Yeah.
This could be the night.
Yeah.
We're done.
That when you were rehearsing the album, did you feel that, gosh, that this is something special?
Well, I mean, we were very excited about it all, and we thought that we'd always made demos and then gone into the studio with a different producer.
Right.
And that's why we got so frustrated, because sometimes we thought that the actual picture that we had on the demos was better than what finally turned out. And here, for the first time, was something which was to our vision of how the song should sound. So we were excited. We all thought we made a great album. And actually, all the reviews were great. But it's just that no one, because our profile was so low by that time in the UK, that no one really was listening to it, and in the first wave it just went away, which is why we split up.
I thought it was absolutely the best we could do at that time.
Yeah.
That was my feeling. And when it wasn't a commercial success, then you start questioning yourself and think, well, this is the best we can do. And commercially, no one was interested. And I think probably everyone was thinking along the same lines. And that certainly was one of the main reasons why the band finished.
It's funny though, because I don't know whether anybody here, I probably not anyone from America doesn't know that in the UK we had a radio station, the only national pop radio station we had. It was called Radio 1, and a radio presenter, funnily enough, from Liverpool, like me, a guy called Kenny Everett, was a huge fan of the Zombies, wasn't he? And he used any excuse to drag you guys in and play your stuff and interview you.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, Rod and Chris did a couple of interviews with him on this is the only rock station in the UK, so it's a big deal, And I did one as well. And he used to play our track. He was the only DJ.
Yeah, I know.
But he was a very powerful DJ.
He was.
And when we said we were going to have to split up, he said, shouldn't you have the album out first before you...
But he was actually very, very influential as a radio presenter, Kenny Everett, because he was friends of the Beatles and things like that. And he was a bit of an anarchist, because he got sacked from Radio 1 more times than I've had odd dinners. For doing things that were very entertaining, but the powers that be didn't like him doing it. But I do know for a fact that he loved you guys. When the album came out, and as you said, it didn't really do much, where did Al Cooper come into the picture? Because I know Al was a big fan of the band and also a big fan of the album, wasn't he?
Well, Al had just become a producer at CBS.
Right.
So in New York, so he was employed he started Blood, Sweat and Tears, but he sort of changed course and become a staff producer at CBS. He was in London and he picked up a big pile of albums, and as he would say, one album stood out. And he went in to see Clive Davis, his boss, because it was his first day at work.
Yeah.
So he was risking his job, really. And he said, we have to sign this album. It's absolutely fantastic. And Clive Davis said, we already have it. And we were going to pass. We weren't even going to issue it. But Al Cooper just kept, getting on at Clive Davis till eventually he did release it. It wasn't on a main CBS label. It was on Date, which was a smaller label.
Yeah.
And but he did release it. But even then, it took months, probably about a year. And so the story goes, one DJ in Boise, Idaho, would not stop playing Time of the Season. And I don't know his name, but if he's here tonight, yeah.
The way that became a hit is it's pretty legendary, and people could turn around and say no, but it really did happen. And of course, the interest in the Zombies kind of rocketed, but you guys weren't a band anymore. I think, Rod, you just started Argent, hadn't you? And you were sort of in the midst of doing the first Argent album.
Well, the thing was that Argent was well underway. Chris and Chris was a sort of honorary member of Argent, and he decided he didn't want to play anymore, but he was going to be co-writer and co-producer. So we were putting a production company together. And actually it was fantastic because 18 months after the Zombies split, we already had the idea for Colin's first solo album. Argent were well underway. We had the ideas for the first Argent album. We were in New York talking to Clive Davis about doing a deal. And Time of the Season was #1 in Cashbox, #2 in Billboard, I think. It was right at the top of the chart. So it was a piece of cake to do the deal, So, we just thought that was great. And we didn't think for a moment about reforming and just trying to get on the coattails of a hit record, because by that time we'd set sail in different waters, if you like, And we were very excited about that. We've always been the sort of people who don't ever look back, we look forward. We've got the joy now of being able to look in both directions at once, because we can still look forward and still get our creative energy from writing and recording new stuff and satisfying ourselves in that way. Within that context, we love doing all the old catalogue as well. So we've got the best of both worlds at the moment.
While Rod and Chris were doing this deal in New York, I was making the tea in the burglary department of the Sun Alliance and London Insurance Company. I couldn't quite work this out. How was I the tea boy in an insurance company? And we had the #1 hit record in America.
Yeah.
He makes a terrible cup of tea, anyway.
There you go then. Say you got a #1 single, there's interest in the band was split, and yet we have people masquerading as the Zombies and performing their new hit single in America, didn't you, at the time?
Absolutely, and Chris phoned up one of the managers of one of the bands from Rolling Stone's offices to get him to talk about it. He didn't know it was Chris White. And the guy said to Chris, we are honouring the name of the dead lead vocalist from the Zombies. We feel it's important that the music lives on, even though the lead vocalist hasn't. And so that was a little article. It was on the front page of Rolling Stone, and for years I have lost it, but that was my first obituary. That's probably not the last.
Well, I guess it comes to all of us. It comes to all of us eventually, but I hope it's a long time in the future for you.
Yay! And then I got a phone call very early in the morning one morning, and it was Paul Atkinson, because by then he'd moved to America and he was working for a record company. And he phoned me, he said, Hugh, is that you? And I went, yeah, it is. Why? He said, because I've just heard you're in America playing with a band, but you're obviously not. He said, but it turns out that you're now the bass player and you're a foot shorter than what you were.
But we later found out, we found out last year that one of the bands that was a fake Zombies became ZZ Top.
Oh, right, okay.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I guess it is. You thinking of doing any ZZ Top?
Yeah, we're thinking of covering them.
Returning the favour. Yeah.
I haven't got the beard though.
I love
The album Odyssey and Oracle, again, a landmark album in many ways, also for the artwork, and we have the gentleman who designed the cover here, Terry Quirk. And Terry, tell us a little bit about the brief for the album. How did you get involved with it?
Could we go back to the original statement about the costing of the album?
Oh, right.
£1,000, because I never got paid. And Rod was challenged by a friend of ours who said, are you ever going to pay Terry Quirk for the album? And he said, yes, when he gets the spelling right.
Yes.
Which wasn't going to happen.
But having said, that's an important part of the sleeve now. I mean, if, you know, you can't imagine it being spelt right, can
Well,
you?
I you know, my claim to fame is that Shakespeare wrote 1,700 new words. He invented 1,700 new words, and he's a genius. And I invent one word, and it's a spelling mistake. It just doesn't seem right.
You know what? I'd look at that as being, you know, if it's good enough for Bill Shakespeare, it's good enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what was the brief then for the cover? I mean,
Very quickly, I was in the Abbey Road studios with the guys, sitting on some steps. They were upstairs in one of the mixing rooms, and they were floating the names. I had an A2 pad. I had a pencil and an old album, and I drew around the old album, and up came the word Odyssey, and I put Odyssey in, and then came the word Oracle, and I put Oracle in, and it fitted, and the little and went in underneath it, because the only way I could put it. I'd been working all over London doing posters for every possible band in every possible rock venue, and I was a terrific fan of the West Coast poster artists. Stanley Mouse, all of them.
Rick Griffin, people like that.
You
Yeah.
loved all their work. And so the style was very easy. When they came down the stairs, I said something like this, and they said, yeah, exactly like that. You know what the songs are about. Put some pictures in, and that's it. And then they gave me a fortnight to do the front cover and the back.
Right.
2 weeks.
Yeah. No pressure.
No pressure at all.
Yeah.
And it's only about 2/3 of the way through the cover that I realised I might have made a slight mistake. And it was too late. And fortunately at that time, it was a time when people were now, like Susie and the Banshees a little bit later, they were taking the word Susie and adding their S-I-O-U-X, S-I-E,
Yeah.
or Julie, J-U-L-I-E, whatever.
Yeah.
So we blagged it for a while. Colin found out a little later.
Well, told me 40 years later. At the beginning, they told me some story about, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, it's a play on words. We were doing an interview really quite recently, and Rod told the true story. I couldn't believe it.
The wonderful thing for me was I worked 20 years in the university, and coming from St Albans and the grammar schools, I was a classical scholar, supposedly. And one day, I'm in having a cup of coffee, and one of my so-called friends came in and said, just been listening to the radio, a couple of your mates, Colin and Rod, I thought, I know what's coming now. He said something about an album, and of course this went around the whole university at the speed of knots, and I think basically my profile dropped dramatically.
Can I just explain as well, again for our American friends, blagged. It's a British word that you use, I mean, in a number of different circumstances, but in this circumstance, if somebody was to ask you, you would just say, of course it's meant to be like this. And of course it isn't, it's a happy accident, that's the truth of the matter. But blagging something is, yes, of course it is. And it's really having the barefaced cheek to sort of, you know, stand up and go, no, you're wrong and I'm right, this is how it's meant to be. So just to explain that.
You're not going to sell us anything, are you?
No, I'm from Liverpool, I'll probably rob it. So, and I can say that because I'm from Liverpool, so if you've got any other Scousers in, you can't say that. I guess when an album doesn't sell, and it sounds horrible that it doesn't sell, but it becomes what they known as, in inverted commas, a critical success. Critical success is great, but it doesn't pay the bills. But when did you start feeling that Odyssey and Oracle was kind of gaining momentum?
Do you know what? I must tell you a quick story. There was a time about 10, 12 years later, something like that, when Chris phoned me up and he said, because he had a couple of his kids at university, and he was saying, you know, I have to tell you, Rod, that Odyssey and Oracle is becoming quite a cult album, you know, in universities. I said, oh yeah, you know, acting in an interesting way. And I put the phone down, and I told my wife, and I said, no, it's not. But then, to my amazement, I found he was exactly right, and it was starting, you know, this journey of gathering momentum, and very slowly becoming something which a lot of current artists were talking about. A lot of, at the time, very young artists. You know, one of the biggest artists still in the whole of the UK is Paul Weller. I mean, much bigger than he ever was here.
Yeah.
I worked with Paul the other day. I did a couple of things on his new album. And he still quotes that as being his favourite album of all time. And he was saying that. And that was the first time I remember someone really talking about it. And from that time onwards, just succeeding bands. I know there's a great Californian band at the moment called the Lemon Twigs, and they quote it as being their favourite album. You know, and these are young guys. It's a band called Questlove. I think there was I saw them quote on a television show. It came up on the internet that they were talking about Odyssey and Oracle in the same breath as I think it was Pet Sounds and a Beatles album as well. And you know, it's fantastic. It goes on, and it really does seem to be able to relate now to obviously people of every generation, which is fantastic. But also, really, you know, teenagers and everything are still finding a way to relate to that album and the things that were going on.
That is apparent in the audiences that come to see us, and we were never more amazed when we finally did decide to do it, and we were going to try and do it in its entirety as we now do. And that first night, we looked at the audience, and it was full of pretty much every generation, and the younger ones were singing along, which was just so thrilling.
It's got to be good though when you kind of capture that, but again, almost inevitable with an album like Odyssey and Oracle, which kind of gains acceptance over a long period of time. Time of the Season, great pop record, big hit for you in America. Didn't do anything in the UK, oddly enough. I don't know why. Should have done. So I apologise for that, because we should have made that a big hit. But you covered it live with Argent and turned it into something else, because it's on the... Anybody got the Encore album by Argent, the live album? If you haven't, you should get it. It's a great live album by the band Argent. And the Encore number, hence the title of the album, was Time of the Season, and it's amazing. I mean, it really is. It picks the song up and shakes it by the neck, and it's just incredible. So that was a good... Oh, there you go, James Bowen. This is the man. This is the guy who brings all his album collections on the cruise and gets the artists to sign them. And he's got albums that I've never seen. So there you go. But yeah, I mean, that was about 1973 when Encore came out. So what made you decide to look back?
Well, in fact, ever since Argent formed, we used to do Time of the Season.
Okay.
I remember just before, when Jim and I were getting Argent together, I remember I had a few weeks free, and Jim was playing with a band called the Mike Cotton Sound. And the Mike Cotton Sound, as well as being a really good jazz group, they used to back visiting American artists. And they were backing a Gene Pitney tour. And Jim phoned me up and said, look, we're looking for a keyboard player. Do you fancy a couple of weeks, you know, good fun? I said, yeah, I'll come and do it. So I went and did it. The support act on the bill was Joe Cocker. Now, it was quite extraordinary, because this was at the time when Time of the Season was just reaching #1 in America. And Gene Pitney knew this, you know, being American, he had his finger on the commercial pulse. But Joe Cocker wasn't really known by Gene's audience at the time. He was just coming out, but fantastically talented guy. And I remember walking into the dressing room one night, and Joe said, "Oh man, I've just heard your record, Time of the Season." He said, and then he proceeded to give a whole performance with all the actors.
Yeah.
It's the time. And I was completely blown away. You got all the words right and everything. It was absolutely fantastic. And Gene, when Gene heard about this, he said, "You wrote Time of the Season." And he said, he couldn't believe it. He said, what are you doing on my tour? And I said, it's just, but Joe on that was so ignored by Junior's audience, who were mostly ladies of a certain age, always sort of blue rinses and everything, and got a certain sort of age and everything. Which is, and they loved Gene and everything, but they didn't get Joe at all at that time, and so they used to get so bored with having no reaction at all, Joe and the Grease Band, that one night they used to get completely stoned, and one night the curtains opened and they were all facing the wrong way. It started there first before they realised it.
Of course, the same with that time of the season is I was touring with Rod when we were with Argent for the first time, and we went to Eric Burden's place. He had a party because he's launching the group War, and Jimi Hendrix was there, and I found myself sitting next to him, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's always time of the season," and he sang it to me as well. So
that's one of those moments, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, because actually then when Rod was putting Argent together, working in, they did Time of the Season, and they had this great feel, basically, going drum and bass, just pattern going. I thought that would make a great song, and that turned into Hold Your Head Up. I've got the name.
You like roses, yeah.
It's an age thing, Chris, don't worry.
Can I need to talk to these guys on the end here, because if you look over here, there's some incredible artwork. So would you like to explain some of the things that we've got over here, because it's pretty incredible. Some of them I've seen before, some of them I haven't. So just go through, pick your favourite and explain something about it.
Well, my favourites are probably Terry's.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Well, you can speak for Terry then.
But after the Zombies toured in 2015 over in the USA, I was trying to put together a huge collage of my whole experience of travelling with these guys for thousands of miles. And as you can imagine, it's like travelling in a bus full of schoolboys. And just all the theatres, the performances, just trying to describe everything. I worked on it for months and it wasn't working. And luckily, Chris has got a background in art, and so just concentrate on the music, just concentrate on Odyssey and Oracle. So I decided to treat all of the songs like a vinyl single, and made them 7x7. And with Terry's permission, used small or large details of his in each of the pictures, and got whoever wrote the song to write a phrase out that I'd chosen for them. So that's how all of those ones happened. Cindy and Chris were over in the UK, picked up on it. Cindy got very excited and said she wanted to make a book, and so a book got made, and I'm very fortunate to be involved with it.
Yeah, it looks incredible. One question I've got to ask you. Having toured with the Zombies, have you recovered yet?
I'm trying, but they keep
Good,
doing it
okay.
again.
Well, bless you, keep trying.
Sorry, she's married to me, you see.
It's worth mentioning too at this stage, because I always like to get this in if at all possible. In that book you'll see wonderful pictures of us pretty much as we are now. They were taken in St Albans a couple of years ago, and my daughter did that, so she's part of the Zombie family too. Absolutely amazing.
Do you mind if I have some of these people? I'm sure are going to want to ask you questions. Who's got a question for the guys? Put your hand in the air. Yes, okay, around the back. It's always at the back, the first one, isn't it? Still, keep me fit. Excuse me, sir, can I just... it's a bit like being in the cinema, isn't it? I'm sorry about this. You don't want me at the cinema, do you? Asking questions. Okay, here you go.
Can you talk about the day you did Tom Petty's radio show and anything else about your relationship with him?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it was a huge, huge shock. Obviously, when we got the bad news that he had died, I just don't know what to say about it, because he seemed such a wonderful, warm, generous person when we spent the day with him. He lived in Malibu, and we went to his house, and he had a lovely studio there, and we spent the afternoon just chatting to him. He was very well informed and incredibly humble. Just a really lovely guy.
Played loads of our tracks, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he knew everything about us. And it was, I mean, I just totally forgot that he was a huge rock star, because he was just such a lovely bloke and so easy to talk to. And of course, you know, I can only repeat that it was just a huge shock and a great sadness and a loss for everyone that he died so tragically and so young. I can just tell you, anyone who hasn't met him or hadn't met him, he was a wonderful person, really, really lovely guy.
Okay, that's good to hear. Anybody else with a question? Put your hand in the air if you've got a question for these guys. Okay, down here. This young man doesn't look old enough to have been alive when the reissue came out on CD.
I think I read that when you recorded the album, you couldn't afford orchestral musicians to play acoustic instruments, so you used a mellotron instead. Looking back, do you think that was the best choice, or would you redo it with acoustic instruments?
No, I think it was a fantastic piece of luck. And the thing is, because we walked in to start our album as virtually as the Beatles were walking out, having just finished the recording of Sgt. Pepper. We recorded it over quite a long time, a long period, but the first sessions that we did were literally after the Beatles had walked out. And they'd left a lot of their instruments lying around. And John, who had just discovered the mellotron, had bought one, John Lennon, and he'd left it in the studio. And at that time, I just thought it was a replacement for strings, which was no way we could afford. But in retrospect, it was a wonderful piece of luck, because of course it has totally its own feel and its own magic, and you have to work within its limitations, which is true. That's often a very, very good thing, having to work within limitations. When you play the mellotron, each note only lasts for about 4 seconds or something like that, because it's on a cassette tape. So you have to keep changing voicings constantly. You can't just put a chord down and let it sustain. It won't do it. It just runs out. So you have to find a technique for playing parts in that way, and it creates something which is entirely peculiar to the instrument. And in retrospect, it was just a fantastic thing, and I much prefer the fact that the lines that I played on there were fashioned by those limitations, rather than having to write orchestral parts, and it would have sounded, in a way, fairly ordinary, I think. So I think it was a great bonus.
Can I just say, as a former roadie, it might have been a good idea that you didn't go out and perform it live, because those machines, they are great in a recording studio. You take it out on the road.
Have you tried a Hammond?
Yeah, I've done that too. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Where's the gig? What's up, 4 flights of stairs with a Hammond? You please. But no, I've had to repair a mellotron in the middle of a gig, and the band I worked with used it on one song for literally the solo in the middle of the song for about 10 seconds, and it was always going wrong. And you had to take it in, you had to cuddle it, you had to let it run, warm up. I mean, seriously, I've treated people far worse than I treated a mellotron. And I hate to say that, but it's a fact, because they are horrible. Because nowadays, digitally, you don't need it.
I have to tell you that when Argent first came over to America, we had to, things were very different in those days. You had to provide your own PA systems, and we had to provide our own instruments, of course. So first of all, we bought my Hammond organ over, and in those days, we just put it on the airport carousel. And so when we got to this huge, bloody great instrument, when we got we were waiting in the baggage department, reclaim, waiting for it to come round, and it appeared, it rose like a giant theatre organ. But not only that, as you quite relevantly said, of course we knew that there was a different voltage system. We knew that
you needed a power pack.
So we needed a power pack. Okay, so we had that together. So we plugged it in, the voltage conversion from 220 to 110.
Yeah.
No problem. That was sorted. But what we didn't realise, it was a different cycle system as well.
Yeah.
It was 50 difference between 50 and 60 cycles. So when I started playing it, it was going, ooh, and that was the start of it. And then because we were hauling it around everywhere, things started appearing. I had a technician who used to spend hours every night repairing the Hammond, repairing our Mellotron in exactly the way that you're describing. It was a complete nightmare. And I remember the Moog synthesizer as well. We used that. And we did a midnight special, which is still played sometimes now. And there's a bit of Moog synthesizer where I was soloing in the middle of it. And right in the middle of my solo, live, no retakes or anything, it just dropped a fourth as I was playing my solo. So you went, whoa! And you had to sort of transpose in your head what you were doing, because everyone else was playing a fourth above it, in key. Yeah. Oh man, it's a nightmare.
Having said that, you didn't need a big toolkit for a Mellotron. A coat, one of those metal coat hangers, and a screwdriver, and you were sorted for a Mellotron.
Before
I have nightmares
Rod
about
had a
that.
Mellotron, when we recorded She's Not There, he had a thing called a Hohner Pianette.
Right.
And that was used on She's Not There and lots of other things. And it's also in an exhibit in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that particular one. And it had a slight fault in that it was very susceptible to humidity. So we would be playing these packed out clubs and it would get very, very hot. And then it wouldn't play as it got humid. So what Rod used to have to do, he used to have to carry a hairdryer with him. So, I can't believe we used to do this. But every so often in the set, he'd have to get the hairdryer out and lift up the top of the pianette and dry it out. Only for about 5 minutes or so. Everybody just walks around.
I have to tell you that when Argent, I still used it with Argent the same way. And one night we played with Chick Corea, and Chick was in the dressing room, and he said, "What are you doing?" I was trying the keyboard.
Yes, live on the road. No. This is a question for Rod and for Chris. Obviously, you were very young guys when the Zombies got their deal and She's Not There came out. How long was it, and I'm saying this slightly tongue-in-cheek, before you realised writing songs could be very lucrative? Because, of course, in the 70s, She's Not There was covered by Santana. Massive, massive hit worldwide. And it's a totally different arrangement. It's opposite to the same song, but it's a great arrangement of it.
Well, luckily, we found out very quickly, because I have to tell you, there was the whole live performance area of what we were doing. We were ripped off like so many other bands, and I don't think we ever broke even. Even when we were at our height, everywhere, we never made money out of what we were doing, where we should have. Some guy that worked within the management office many years later told us that we were ripped off to the extent of $2 million.
Well, there was, it's fun, I'm not going to, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to mention his name, I don't think I should. Is it, he's dead? No, I can. You managed by Tito Burns. Yeah,
Well, that's right.
It's funny, I know a few people who were managed by Tito Burns, they have a very similar story, funnily enough.
Well,
but he was very old school, wasn't he?
He was very old school. But what I could never forgive him, he was a pole-winning musician himself, who had a big band in the 40s, which was very successful. But let me say, on the other side of things, publishers, and we were on a release tape deal, so from the record side of things and the songwriting side of things, we always got the money that was due to us. And because we had a lot of success around the world, not so much in the UK, of course, that side of money always came through. And I couldn't believe the first, because we were school kids really, and suddenly I got the first check for She's Not There, and I got every penny that I was due. And I remember talking to Tommy Moyler about Concrete and Clay, which was a huge hit for Unit 4+2. And I said, isn't it great, this, you get a hit record, and we're so young, and we're getting these sort of terrific amounts of money, because we had initial success, and he had a #1 record. He said, I haven't seen a penny. And I said, what? I can't believe it. But that was what happened in those days.
Well, again, John Lennon said, didn't he? Don't sign anything unless your brother's a lawyer. and I guess, and it sounds funny, but if the Beatles are going to get ripped off, then everyone else is fair game, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, included the Stones as well. They lost millions with Alan Klein, the same guy who managed the Beatles last. So, looking at the book then, and when you got the book, how did you feel about seeing it? Because it's one thing living the life and having all the memories, but then having it in a physical film in front of you, looking through it. Did it bring back any good or bad memories?
It was wonderful seeing it, because we hadn't seen some of those photographs ever.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Because that, again, one of the, on Chris's point, one of the problems with our bad, the way we were managed in the very early days, was that no one cared about our image. And because we only ever had one hit single in the UK, the only session that, photo session that got constantly recycled in all the papers for the whole of our career, it dogged us with this terrible first photo session that we had. But we had loads of great photos taken, and in this book, they were found, and they're all there. And the other thing was that the people that put the book together, which was BMG and also Cindy De Silva from our management company, they got these, which we didn't know about. They got these quotes from everybody, from Brian Wilson. The book at the beginning is Brian Wilson saying, "Wow, the Zombies just blew me away, and I loved their harmonies." I mean, this is Brian Wilson. I couldn't believe that. That was the first thing that we saw there. And then there's quotes from everybody, endorsements from Santana, from, oh God, Graham Nash. I can't think of some of the young bands as well, from independent bands like Cage the Elephant. You know, it's great.
Well, you're going to be performing Odyssey and Oracle live for us on the cruise. You've done it a few times though, haven't you now? So, it's kind of...
We'll get it right soon.
Must be bedding in by now, yeah. Were you surprised at how involved it is though, to play live? Because there's a lot going on that album.
Well, the thing was, when Chris came up with the idea of us doing it, actually, because he used to come along to the band that how we normally play, he used to come along and see us, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "We've never played Odyssey from the start to finish." And Colin and I do about 5 of the songs from Odyssey, which work brilliantly with 5 people. But some of the songs, like Brief Candles, like Hung Up on a Dream, Changes, only work when every single overdub and everything is played. So we thought if we were going to do it, we were going to reproduce every single note that was on the album, and including sourcing a Victorian pump organ, which we did on the original things, and we've got one from the First World War that we use now. So it's entirely accurate, and it was a real joy, actually, playing again with Chris and Hugh, and using the other guys from what we call our current band to fill in every part of every overdub, to get Viv, who's a brilliant singer, Chris's wife, to do some of the high falsetto parts that we were doing on the original. That you know, you can't sing 2 parts at once. So it was a real joy doing that. But on the first night, when we got on stage to start, people kept coming up and saying, "Do you know who's in the audience?" And everybody from Snow Patrol to Robert Plant and everything. We thought, "Oh my God, stop! You know, don't tell us," because if we only had 2 days production rehearsal, didn't we? And we had Darian Sahanaja, which was a joyous find because we knew he was a fan, but he knows the Mellotron overdubs that I did better than I do, you know, and so it was just wonderful that he could come along and do it. But the thing was, we thought, if this doesn't work, it's going to be the longest, you know, hour and a half of our lives. But we knew within 40 seconds that it was going to be great, and it really worked. And it's been a gas going back, and we've done it many more times than we ever intended to do it. But you know, there has to come a point where we say, no matter how proud we are of this album, you have to draw a line under it, because we've celebrated something that happened 50 years ago. And while we love looking back, as long as we can look forward, you know, there has to come a point where it loses its magic if you just constantly do it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, 50 years on, it's still an incredible album. And I want to say one thing as well, because one guy sadly no longer with us, Paul Atkinson. So with great respect, we have to mention Paul as well, who was a founder member of the Zombies. And I'm sure you guys, there's a dedication in the book to it as well. So Paul, I remember I remember meeting Paul many, many years ago in the 70s. He was a lovely guy. And it's great that you've sort of mentioned him in the book as well. Because as I said, you guys were very important. And next year, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for these guys.
Can I just say on that point that we really, really do appreciate the fantastic support of many people in this audience and people all over the world that continually voted again and again, and gave so much of their time and support. We were blown away with that, and we do really appreciate it. So thanks everyone.
Going to see later this week. The Zombies, and don't forget the book is over there. Give the guys, I'm sure the guys will sign it for you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.